Hey everyone, how's it going? Welcome back to another review here for Tales of the Walking Dead. This episode was really great. Honestly, it was really great. I don't know if it's because I had my expectations set pretty low, but I actually had a really fun time with this episode, and it's definitely the best one of the season for sure. It might end up being that way by the time the season's done, but I think this episode proves that Tales of the Walking Dead is a worthy television show because this is the stuff that we expected from it. It's just sometimes when we get those weirder episodes, it can really throw someone off, right? Like it could really throw you off to the point where it's like, was that worth even telling, or were you just trying to be weird for the sake of weird, right? So yeah. Anyways, episode 3 wasn't that. Episode 3 definitely was a really fun episode. And so obviously, before we go any further, please be aware that this will contain spoilers for the episode. And also, as always, if you do want more Walking Dead content, Tales of the Walking Dead content, Fear the Walking Dead content, anything, then make sure to hit subscribe. Now, the commentary from Alpha throughout the episode I thought was really cool because it was like this sort of like, this is my story. I think it definitely really worked in this episode because it made it feel like we were watching sort of a past part of the story and we weren't like currently in that story. And I liked it from that perspective. Just because obviously we are sort of more in the future with that character, even though the character's dead already, but like we're more closer to that timeline. So I personally, for me, I liked that part of the narrative, I like coming at it from that perspective. The story here, I believe, is set after Alpha left her husband, like after she left her husband in the basement or whatever, she ends up on this boat here. I actually don't mind that for a story. I kept thinking that this story was set before the apocalypse and that somehow it was going to connect with her going to that basement somehow, like, yeah, and then eventually they go from there to some of the basement stuff. Maybe they would show us that footage, but eventually end up, more into the apocalypse. But no, we actually didn't get that at all. It was basically set afterwards, and you guys are probably going to have to clarify this for me just because I never really caught on to when this happens, and I don't know if they forgot, but it doesn't really make too much sense to me as of now. But where does the Alpha meeting Beta episode fit into all of this? Because obviously at that point, she's just sort of running around with Lydia. She meets Beta. By the time she meets Beta, she really just like sticks with Beta, obviously. But when she does meet Beta, she's not a whisperer. And obviously in this episode here, we see at the end, she was out there with Lydia, but she eventually runs into the Whisperers and she's not with Beta. So obviously this can't be when she's with Beta, but she runs into the Whisperers. And it seems like once she runs into them, she sticks with the Whisperers, eventually becoming the leader. But then when we see her meet with Beta, she's like, you know what I mean? I'm a little confused with the timeline here. I don't know where that fits. Did she run into Beta before she went to the boat? I don't know if that makes too much sense because she would have left Beta then, right? So that part that I'm a little confused by, like maybe again, if they do another part here, they could probably explain a lot more of that. In terms of what we got in this episode, I do think it was a worthy story to tell. And the reason why I say that is because there's a lot of story that you can tell with Alpha. And I think if you just tell the main parts of it, you sort of ignore some of the stuff like this that you can easily tell. And so doing something like this, in terms of the boat storyline, I know I've been seeing some criticism saying, well, there was no point in even telling that part of it because like that really didn't matter. Like what happened in this episode? We saw her on this boat. She leaves the boat and then runs into, the Whispers. Like that's basically what happens. To me, I think it was a worthy story because it really told, the side of Alpha's mindset when compared to just more like normal people, and how earlier on it was really rough for her to try and survive because people just thought she was, up to no good or she wasn't contributing to this in this way. Or, like I definitely think there was some mental health issues there, obviously. I thought the episode would focus on that a little bit more, but maybe she doesn't have, the same issues as I thought she would, which is totally fine. I mean, I guess they did it as much as they could. I mean, you could see Alpha, like with Alpha, the one thing that I've learned about her is that she thinks so differently. She's super selfish, but she's only selfish for her and her daughter. But then there's like this switch sometimes where she doesn't care about her daughter. Like it's not that she doesn't care about her daughter. It's almost like the way she was raised was that you need to be as harsh as you can with your kids because you really care for them and you want them to learn right. But she just like pushes it too far to the point where it's like she realizes, oh, maybe I shouldn't have been doing that. Like that's kind of messed up. And that's what this episode focuses on. It focuses on the complexity of Alpha. And I think more specifically, that complex relationship she has with her daughter. Because it's such a complex relationship. I think, the stuff between Alpha and Lydia. I mean, I wish that the final season, or I hope in the future if we do see more from Lydia, I hope we get a lot more focus on that, because I feel like ever since Alpha died in late season 10, I kind of feel like, the stuff that Lydia's going through has kind of been ignored. Like, how does she feel about the situation? I know she lost her mom and there's all of that stuff. People lose people all the time on the show, so I get it. You're not going to give special attention to certain things like that because, I mean, you'd be doing it for every single character. But I feel like there's something more there with Lydia. And I think that's why, again, I really like this episode, because they focused on how complex it was and how messed up Lydia is. Like, that's the thing. Like, when you see the stuff that Lydia went through, like, she must be going through so much right now just in her head. And I feel like we should be getting a lot more of that, right? Like, Lydia, man, she struggled so much. Her mom really messed her up. Like, some of it was Alpha's fault, but some of it was just sort of, the way Alpha was raised and the way that she tried to make Lydia stronger. But I think at this point in Lydia's life, we should be seeing a lot more from that, right? I think we should be seeing her struggle with just more of what to do there. And again, I think this is stuff that you can definitely focus on if you were doing a Walking Dead 2.0, because say it's, and I say 2.0 in the sense of like a next generation type thing where it's 20 years in the future. Maybe Lydia is like 38, 40 or something like that. Maybe she has a daughter or a son, right? Like, maybe she has a child and she's having this struggle of like, how do I raise my child? I don't want to be like my mother. And so all these things happen. Like, maybe they're saving it for something like that. Maybe at this age, you don't really think about, how my mother messed me up, this and that, and trying to deal with things. But I just feel like right now they should be focusing on that a little bit more with Lydia here in the final season. But it is what it is. Again, I think that's the thing. That's why I really like this story here with Alpha. It's because, I mean, it was a really good story with Alpha, but I think any good story with Alpha just furthers, I think, the character development of Lydia. Now, the story of this episode focused on, the leader of this boat. I don't remember her name now, because again, I watched it a couple of days ago. I've been super late with this review, but she just kind of, like, she doesn't hate Alpha, but she just really disapproves of her. And she's really like not wanting her to be there because of her mistreatment of Lydia. And this woman really does seem to care about everyone on there. Like, she does actually seem to care. It's just, I think she's being a little too naive on how the real world works. And obviously we saw that here, right? Like, we saw what happened here. That guy, I think his name was Billy. I could have got that wrong, but he attempts to take over the ship. It basically would have worked if it wasn't for Alpha. And that's what I mean. It was super easy for him to do something like that. Like, he literally just joins. There was no sort of screening process. I mean, maybe there was a little bit of one, but it was basically, all right, just help out. And then he's kind of helping out. And we see this character quite a bit throughout the episode. I believe he was the bartender. And then we see him sort of throughout just talking with Alpha. And that's what I mean. Like, someone like that could easily infiltrate this base and then just take over like this, like that, you know what I mean? So definitely with this woman's leadership, like that's sort of the issues there. And again, like, a lot of characters have dealt with that. Although I'll say this, going back to season 2 of The Walking Dead, our characters were very, very suspicious of Randall, like, pretty much immediately. So I think she was just kind of ignorant to what could actually happen here. I think the smart people in those situations don't trust certain people. Like, they don't trust anyone, because people can come over here with a bunch of weapons and try to take over your base, your house, or wherever you're staying. She didn't seem to have that worry, like, whatsoever at all. And I think that's why we got what happened here. And then we see Billy again attempt to take over the ship. Alpha was right about that. She wasn't crazy. And basically she saves everyone. I mean, she saves everyone, but everyone essentially kind of dies anyway. So, like, I guess in that sense, Alpha kind of saves herself, right? And that was really, again, like, that was sort of the big moment in the episode there, where she's speaking with that woman at the end. And she basically just gives her a mark. And it's just like, you remember me. Like, when you see this, you remember me. And Alpha in the end was right about everything. Her suspicions of everything, the way that she wants to run everything, I think based off of the events of this, just confirmed to her that what she's doing is right, and she has to be like this cautious. And that's the thing about the apocalypse, is like, it's so hard to stay positive, I think, because it's like, if you try to stay too positive on things, these other really bad things are going to happen, right? Like, your mind almost has to change. It has to change to the way that the apocalypse now works. And I think Alphas was able to do that. I think a lot of characters on The Walking Dead or Fear the Walking Dead were able to do that. And it seems crazy to not really trust people and just to assume, yeah, well, it's not going to happen. Like, people aren't going to do that. But people do really crazy things when they're trying to survive. Like, when people have to survive, they will do anything. And so that's something that she didn't know. And so Alpha basically just said, yeah, you know, my way was the right way, and I'm just going to follow this for now on. And I think she really used that with her relationship there with Lydia and sort of how she led the rest of her life there. And then again, at the very end, that was the really cool thing about all of that. She encounters the Whisperers. The leader's name was Hera, and I actually mentioned this in like a trailer breakdown or something, but yeah, she was the face of the mask, which was kind of cool. Like, I was wondering if it would build up to something like this or if they would do something like that, and that's exactly what happened. And the way that they shot the scene, like, we never saw her face, so we don't know what Hera actually looks like. We just saw her Whisperer mask. When she takes it off, we see the blonde hair, but we don't see her face, and then it immediately cuts to black right away because Alpha gets knocked out. Cuts to black, and then we see Alpha afterwards with, you know, we see her approaching this mask, and she's now Alpha. She is now the leader of the Whisperers. And basically, I mean, yeah, that's how it works there with the Whisperers, right? Like, if you want to challenge for a leadership role, you need to challenge to fight the leader, and if you succeed, you are the leader. And I'm assuming that she wore her mask, and it's kind of cool. Well, I say wore her mask, she wore her face technically, but it's really interesting when you look at the fact that that's what Alpha did here. And then fast forward to season 10, episode 15, where Beta, you know, he obviously didn't want to be the full leader because he really believed that Alpha was the leader of the Whisperers. Like, she was the ultimate leader. And so he only wore half of her face. So I just really like the symbolism there. I really like the fact that all of this connects. And I think there's a lot more story to tell here. I think if you're going to do an episode 2 of this story, or part 2 or whatever, in season 2 or in season 3, I think you can do a story where maybe we see what happens. You know, Alpha wakes up, she's with Lydia, and then she kind of maybe eventually escapes. And then some of the stuff happens where she does run into Beta. And then I think maybe when she meets Beta, she's like, you know what, he could probably help me with that group. And then eventually she ends up back with the Whisperers and whatever. And then she challenges Hera to that fight, which eventually leads, you know, to her being the leader, which I feel like at that point, that's basically it for Alpha's story, unless you want to do a part 3 where you do see the Whisperers in general trying to do other things, and maybe they like encounter another group, or there's just something else happening. But yeah, I really enjoyed the episode. I thought it was really great. Again, it was definitely a really Alpha-centric episode, but like I mentioned in the review, you know, it's Alpha-centric, but it really does further that character development of Lydia, because you just see a lot of that backstory, and a lot of Alpha's backstory is obviously Lydia's backstory, right? And that's why I wish right now Lydia would, you know, her character would explore a little bit more with that. And they're not really doing a lot with her story right now. She's just sort of there and just living there. But there's so much, like, there's so much you're able to do here. And I think that's one of the things that Tales of the Walking Dead, again, I guess that's technically kind of true. Like, once The Walking Dead ends this year, Tales of the Walking Dead in future seasons could take those characters and give us some stories of what those characters are up to afterwards, right? So technically that's something that they can do for a while, so they're kind of keeping the Walking Dead story alive. I mean, you would have to show off Alexandria or the Commonwealth, but I guess it wouldn't be the end of the world to rebuild some of those sets for a little bit, right? Like, you don't have to showcase everything. You could also reuse some older footage, this and that. Like, you're able to get around it. Anyways, I really like this episode. Definitely a really phenomenal episode, and I'm excited for episode 4, even though I know some of the reviews are saying episode 4 was the worst one so far this season, which I don't completely understand, because to me, episode 2 was, yeah. Anyways, I'm gonna leave it here. Definitely post all your thoughts down below. Hope you guys all enjoyed the video, and I'll see you guys in the next one.